Property Patriot, you are cleared hot.
Have you ever wondered how people get started in real estate investing? Or maybe you're already an investor and you're looking for ways to improve your skills. My guest today is Anson Young. He's been investing in real estate for almost 20 years, and he has a proven track record of success. He's also a Bigger Pockets author and contributor. He's a marketing expert who specializes in off-market deal acquisition. And it all started with Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the loss of a job, and he never looked back. Find out how he started, his struggles, and how he overcame them to grow in the space. Find out all that and more today, where we provide real estate investors the tools to achieve generational wealth. Welcome to the AMI Podcast. I'm your host, Bud Evans. This is show number 41. Good day, high flyers, and welcome to the AMI Podcast. I am your host, Bud Evans, and today I am joined by Anson Young. How are you, Anson?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Anson, would you mind doing me a quick favor and giving me a once-over on who exactly is Anson Young?
Sure. I am a real estate investor and agent out of Denver, Colorado. Been investing since 2005 and have one son in middle school and been married to my wife for 21 years now. So that's a really quick and dirty rundown.
You're selling yourself a little bit short, too. I know you through LinkedIn. You got quite a few things going on.
Yeah, so I am a Bigger Pockets author and contributor. I also do some video creation and things like that for them and for myself. And I like to think that I run a marketing business rather than a real estate business. I just happen to deal in real estate, but I very much focus on marketing and off-market deal acquisition.
Awesome. How exactly did you wind up in real estate?
So long story short, I was in IT way back in the day. I got laid off, and a friend of mine gave me Rich Dad, Poor Dad to read right before I moved down to Arizona from Colorado. And so I decided from there, after it blew my mind, it was time to maybe try this real estate thing out, and have been doing it ever since. So that's the that's the very quick version, but it hits all the main points for sure.
What was the first thing you did? Was it a wholesale? Was it a rental? Did you flip, or how'd you get into, tell us about your first deal?
Yeah. I spent about a year, really just flailing around and trying to figure out exactly how to do this real estate thing. I had a kind of coach at the time who was out of state, and he gave me this big book of 20 different methods that you can invest in real estate. And honestly, it's just too much information. Looking back, if I just laser focused on one thing, I would have been way further ahead than I was. But I lucked into my first deal. An agent that I had networked with, and I had done a bunch of jobs for her in exchange for learning the MLS or learning how to comp properties or how contracts work, all that stuff. So I would go dig post holes in yards to post her signs. She would teach me how to do real estate stuff. And so she came to me one day and said, "Hey, I have a client who's going to sell one of his houses. It's in a really good location that is going to be in the path of progress in Phoenix. And I think it's just too good of a opportunity to miss." And, I analyzed it, but I had no idea what I was doing. So thankfully it was actually a decent deal. I think you could throw a dart at a map in Phoenix at that time and hit something that's going to appreciate in the next year. So it's probably dumb luck plus good opportunity. So we bought it. I initially had tried to do one of those 20 things that my coach was trying to tell me to do, like lease option it, or maybe just turn around and sell it. And my wife was the one who was like, "Hey, we're paying rent to live over here, and we have this house that needs some work over here. Why don't we just move in and do the work, and then we can sell it whenever we're ready to sell." And so we basically did what's now called a live-in flip, moved into the property, fixed it up over the next year. And actually, it was time to get out of Phoenix after we'd been there for 2 years. And almost a year to the day that we bought it, we ended up selling it, and we made, $60,000 and moved back to Denver. And so that's how that went. It was a lot of luck and a lot of good market timing, even though we didn't plan to time it like that. But it worked out really well for us. And I think a live-in flip is a good model if you need a place to live and fix it up as you go. You can earn some equity that way for sure. So that was the kind of story of our first deal.
Nice. And if I knew then what I know now, I probably would have done the same thing, or at least some kind of house hack or something of that nature.
Exactly.
But awesome. That turned out well for you. What have you run into stumbling blocks? Everybody pretty much has the one story.
Oh, absolutely. We all like to trade horror stories, right?
Yeah.
For me, it was a project, I think it was 2018 or so. I generally stay away from high rehab and older houses and structural. I just don't really touch it. Just stuff that I just don't want to deal with. And I broke some of my rules. I took on a house with structural. I was one of those things where I had some private money sitting there. I felt like I needed to get another deal done by the end of the year. Stretched on some of my criteria, which is obviously lesson learned, but took on a house with structural issues. And basically I had a front to back slope. The back had sunk about 4 inches, which is pretty rare here, honestly, in Colorado. It's just not a thing that you see very often. And so talked to two very good structural companies. One's promising the moon, and they're the biggest guy in town. The second one is giving me a more realistic view of what to expect. And he had worked for the biggest guy in town for 15 years. I think he was just tired of it and went on his own. But so I went with the cheaper guy who had at least selling me a realistic picture of what's going on. He's like, look, they're going to tell you that you can get all 4 inches back and that you'll be perfect. He's like, I'm going to tell you that about half of that is realistic, and that's just the way it is. And sure enough, the first company's selling me everything's going to be fine and it's going to be perfect. And so we went with the second company. I was there for the lift. It was actually a very intriguing day in the day of real estate for me, but they lifted it. It was like 2.5 inches. I felt like that should be fine, but it's one of those things. I think the human brain can just tell if you're walking on a slope of any kind. And I'm still walking around the house going, any buyer that's walking through here is just going to 100% notice this. And there's honestly nothing else that you could really do. I think that the second company is one of the better ones in town, and he's actually selling me something realistic. So no fault to him, of course, but it was my fault for taking on this project. And sure enough, the project went over budget. The project went way over on time because of the structural issues and the disclosures and everything that you have to do. It sat on the market for twice the amount of time that we had budgeted for. And walking in after having done 150 flips or something like that, there's 2 that I've had to bring my checkbook to closing. And it's just a painful thing to have to do of, hey, I'm supposed to be making money on this deal, not losing $35,000 on it. And so sometimes you just have to just get through it and move on to the next one and learn those lessons so you don't fall back into that tiger trap every time.
That's it. Now, what did you change after that, though? Because we all have them. I just got out of a house. We call it Voldemort, right? So my son and I, we've got,
oh no,
we're at about 50 doors personally owned, 100 flips, another 100 total with limited partnerships and whatnot. But when you got done with it, what did you do to ensure that it would never happen again?
Back on the table was no more structural. And it's just something that's pretty rare here. I think that there's some markets where structurals, every other house has some sort of issue. Here, it's not a huge problem. There's always settling, but it's not usually more than that. And so back on the table was really no structural and huge rehab. And then just going back to basics on my model of not, I think I was just too impatient. That's why I took that deal. I was like, yeah, I can handle this. The numbers are a little tight. If I get in and out in 3.5 months, it's totally fine. And that's if I sell where I need to be. So I just went back to basics and really just said, you know what, this is my buy box. This is my business box. And every time I go outside of it, I get stung. So I like crawl back in my box and I'm happy in here because I don't make as many mistakes as if I go and do crazy things. And so some of it's just back to basics and just hitting the reset button and saying, okay, like we could be more patient. We can go back to not taking on structural deals and really just sticking to that instead of trying to flex it just to get an extra deal done in the year, which comes back and bites you.
Yeah, it's funny. As you're sitting there talking about it, I'm looking over at my whiteboard and I've got two things written down. What do we do and what do we do well? It's just funny that when you're looking at this, you have to know what you want and then you have to stick with what you want. So that's a great lesson to learn.
Absolutely.
Awesome. And what current projects do you currently have?
What we're currently doing for the last 18 months, almost 2 years now, is we've been focused mainly on out-of-state BRRRR investing. So marketing out of state, acquisitions out of state, and obviously going through the entire BRRRR process. And I had been focused on transactional real estate, wholesaling, fix and flips, and my license activity for a long time, and decided, you know what, now it's time to really go after cash flow. And we found 3 or 4 markets out of state that we really like, started testing the water with marketing, and have gone through the whole process of testing to see if we could buy the property, testing to make sure that we can have good, reliable people on the ground for fixing, and then all the way through to the end and doing actual BRRRR purchases. So that's what we're up to these days.
Awesome. As a Jersey guy in the Philadelphia market, I fully agree with long distance investing. I have properties in Pittsburgh. I mean, we
Nice.
still get the occasional deal in New Jersey, but we're probably 2 to 3 Pittsburgh to Jersey right now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it works out really well that way. Yeah. So awesome.
Yeah, it's funny.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Oh, no, I was going to say, it seems like a lot of people who get into that, they do less deals in their home market and they're doing like way more outside, which is what we're doing as well.
It's easier, I find. I don't know about you, but if I'm managing the general contractor or the subs, or like right now, my son is doing project management, which is great, but it's just headache. Whereas when I'm hiring someone and they know I'm long distance, I'll deal with emails twice a day, and then I'll just go, okay, run with that. We just had one with a porch issue, and I was like, yeah, 3,000, fix it. Don't defer that maintenance. So it just makes it simpler. It simplifies everything, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, man. So what's the future hold? What's on the horizon?
I think we're going to continue to buy BRRRR properties, probably to a certain point. I have no interest in being a bajillionaire and owning 10,000 doors or anything like that. We'll probably get to about 100 units at the end of next year and really just figure out if that's good and we're happy with that and we can stabilize everything and just make sure everything's running on rails. Mm-hmm. And we already have marketing systems built out in these markets. Hire in a business manager to continue handling the wholesales and the retail deals that we're doing there. Since why turn off the marketing faucet if it's actually producing deals at the end of the day? We just don't have to take down every single one. We can now maybe just do more transactional business, but hopefully I'm out of that. And I would love to actually focus on some development here in Denver, some just ground up interesting projects, nothing crazy, just probably build some spec homes and things that actually tickle my fancy, so to speak, but more passion projects. I really like that entire process from ground up. And I think that's probably my future, is doing a handful of those projects a year and enjoying. My son's going to be in high school in a couple of years and, enjoying that time and being able to do all the cool things that come with having older kids, and yeah, that's my goal.
Okay. That's awesome, man. Listen, when my son was going through high school, he's 31 now. He's out of college and everything. He's a
Nice.
nurse. He's actually an assistant director at a major university hospital here. And man, that they were looking back, they were some of the best years ever. We were coaching ice hockey together. So that was a lot of
Oh,
fun,
wow.
man. Yeah. Enjoy the time, especially if you're able to do what we do the way we do it, just working out of a home office and spend that extra time with your kid. That's awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's huge on my importance list is to be available and always around.
Great. And listen, as you're talking, man, I gotta say, Anson, as you're talking, I'm sitting here and you've got my head going tangent because I'm like, oh, Colorado. I know a few people in Colorado. I wonder if Anson's thought of short-term rentals in that area and doing development of short-term rentals on areable land. I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
Because we're about the same size, which is one of the reasons that I reached out to you on LinkedIn. I'm just curious, like, which direction do you see yourself going? I know we're talking about development and all that stuff, but you have to get it. You have to get that shiny object syndrome every once in a while. How do you avoid it?
Yeah, shiny object is tough. Sometimes I don't avoid it and then I regret it. Like I'll go down some sort of path and just get distracted because maybe I'm just bored with something that's going on in real estate. And I always come back to, so maybe indulging a little bit and then figuring out if it's something that's sustainable. I think that there are some guys that I know that they'll, like, if they're interested in a certain niche and they can maybe hire somebody and hand it off to somebody.
Yeah.
To, hey, take this course, go through this thing. I'll fund it and see if we can make some money that way. So some people empower others to self-start. I usually go down the road a little bit, realize that I'm off track, and then get back on the rails and go from there. It's never easy, of course. You're always like enticed by everything crazy. And I think at the end of the day, it helps if you just have like a nice, strong vision and something that you can look at every day that reminds you of like why you're doing what you do and, you know, the exact reasons. So that if you look at that and you're like, oh, I'm off track. It's time to get back. Time to get back to what I'm doing so I can build what I'm trying to build.
Awesome, man. And so I'm going to track along with that because I know I just got us like way off topic, but at the same time, like it's absolutely on point. So what is one thing that you learned as your wealth increased?
One thing that I learned, I think like pretty much everything that's culminated to this point is a lot of the things that I do can be, anybody could basically do it, but it comes down to like just mindset and being able to grind through some certain things, like having a gritty type of personality is more important than anything that I've built and anything that I have monetarily or materially. If all that goes away, would I be fine? And if you have that ability to grind through things and be okay, then I think that's way more important. Like, I think that some people just get too attached to those things and then think it's like a one-off fluke. But if everything's like taken away from you today, would you be okay? Could you restart? Could you live minimally? Could you do all those things? And I think that having that kind of mental toughness is more important than any kind of wealth, because anything can happen at any time. And I'd rather be prepared than sitting on a stack of money or something like that.
Yeah. Perfect, man. I think it was The Millionaire Next Door that had all of the stats of multimillionaires, and the average was like they drove like a 5-year-old car, used sometimes. They wore like inexpensive jeans, lived in a modest house in a modest area. So
yeah, that stuff's important to me. You'll never see me like in Vegas in front of a Lambo or something. You know, like that's just not who I am. And I think another point, I'm going to hijack this one more time, but I think another thing is like when you talk to people who are like on an entrepreneurial path, like a lot of them get it that when it comes to kids, that it's actually more it hurts your kids more just to hand off a bunch of money or ask or something like that. And especially on that second or third generational wealth, it's absolutely just destroys families and stuff. And I think being smart about that, like maybe when I was young, I'd be like, I want to give my kid everything. And then you get older and you're like, no, I don't think that's a good idea.
Yeah, man. Listen, my son came to me, and this was before I got on this journey, but my son basically said, hey, Dad, if you had to do it all over again, what would you do? Because at the time I was a cop. I was still in the reserves. I hadn't gone back into the military yet. And I said, well, I'd probably go into the medical field. And he said, oh, because I was thinking about being a cop. I said, you will go to college. You will have that choice when you get out. You can make that decision. But I will not be standing at a police car looking over, watching my son be. So it turned out to be a really great thing, because now he's got all of this work ethic. And now he's actually working with me in project management. He still has his nursing job, but
of course,
at some point he'll make that transition. He just made a bunch of money, gifted him his first 14,000 on 2 deals. Yeah.
Nice.
So he's learning, and at the same time he's working his tail off. He understands now why you're working a 12-hour day and making that extra money. It's good stuff, awesome, man. That was a great point. Are you a veteran or a first responder looking to get into real estate, struggling with not knowing how to start, or afraid to get started, or worse? You're listening to the world lie and tell you that a 401k is all you're going to need when you're ready to retire. Well, go ahead and give me a follow on Instagram at bud.evans, where I show my followers how to overcome the fear and knowledge barriers and get to their financial freedom through rental properties. Follow at bud.evans on Instagram for more. We are going to go into the Soaring 4. These are the same 4 questions that we ask every guest that can help someone who is just starting out achieve new heights. So, what is one thing you use to keep you motivated?
So one thing that I use is, back to a point from before, is I have this 3-foot poster over here in my office that it's basically my personal vision over here. And it being that predominant and large, it's 3-foot poster in huge letters, is every time I'm in my office and I look in that direction, it's like grounds and motivates the reason of what I'm doing. So if I'm having a tough day and I don't want to make another phone call or do something else, I can be centered by that motivation and that vision and that goals that are the reason of why I'm doing what I do.
Awesome. What is one thing that you learned that completely changed your mindset?
So yeah, I saw this question on when you sent it over, and honestly, the number one thing that I could point back to is I read a book called The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday, and it's rooted in Stoicism. And the more I learned and explored that, the more it helped craft my mindset of being less reactive to external events. Like, external events are going to happen. That what's really important is how you actually react to those things more than those things happening. Because I can't stop you from doing something to me necessarily, but I can act on what I actually do after that. And so that has been a huge mindset shift from that book and onwards, and diving more into it is very much self-control and being just being mentally as strong as possible in that way of, hey, my reaction I can control. I can't control their actions.
Awesome. So have you read Marcus Aurelius at all?
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. Yeah. Stoicism, and that, I know I don't come across as such, but I'm more of a minimalist.
Nice.
But yeah, great. What tools do you use to keep you on track?
So yeah, tools are a fun thing for sure. So in the past, I've made my own planner that would kind of go through your every single day thing. I have a video on it somewhere. You can professionally get it done and do 1 or 2 of them. And I moved from that to, honestly, everything's now on my iPad. So between Notion, which is notion.com, they have a a bunch of different templates and things that you can do to keep your days in track. Between that and Good Notes, that's where my brain lives now, is between those two things, and it can integrate with your tasks and your calendar and all kinds of stuff. But I feel like it's a good way to organize your existence. Is I like having a place where I can write out questions and thoughts during the day, and then be able to come back and revisit that. And of course, you have tasks and you have all kinds of stuff that you can generate from there. But I feel like those two apps and my iPad are pretty much indispensable.
Yeah. I just started playing around with Notion. That looks like a pretty sharp tool.
It's crazy. It's a sandbox, so it's overwhelming. You can add and do anything that you want in there. So sometimes it's hard to realize what you need and what you want to do. But once you start beating it into submission of what you want to do, it's very powerful.
All right. And then last, what is one thing you'd change if you had to start over?
Yeah. So I think about this a lot. And the number one thing that I would do is my first deal, I would definitely house hack my first deal. I feel like house hacking is the best and easiest and most powerful way to get started in this business. And if I started off by buying a fourplex, living in one unit, renting out the others, having them pay for my living expenses for a couple years while I save up to do the next thing, that would have just been a slingshot start rather than meandering about and flailing and trying to figure out what I'm doing. I have a lot of house hack clients that I've worked with over the years, and just watching them go from one to the next and then off to getting married and doing their thing, and they have a collection of properties over here. It's always been like a hugely powerful tool that I wish I did when I was a young man, for sure.
One of the greatest things was watching my son. He was like, "Oh yeah, I'm looking for a small 2-in-1 so that I can keep it and move into a bigger house." It's not house hacking, but at least it's something. It's a start. So
it's awesome.
Yeah.
Heck yeah.
I wish I would have done the same thing.
I think we all do.
Okay. All right. So hang on. Hey, Anson, do me a favor. Tell me a little bit about your book.
Yeah. It's called Finding and Funding Great Deals. It's published through Bigger Pockets Publishing. Came out in 2017 or so. And honestly, it's not dated in that way. It's still everything that we do. We still do by the book, so to speak. But it really is meant to get you from zero to the closing table. So it's not a fix and flip book, and it's not a wholesale book or a rental book. It's all of those things in the context of actually going and finding deals, whether it's through networking with agents or going off market and actually marketing to homeowners, all the way through deal analysis, through negotiation, the contracts and the closing process, financing your deal, 10 different ways to basically finance your deal, and then all the way basically to the closing table. So if you do all that, it should get you to the end goal. If you want to close on it and then burn it down the next day, that's up to you. That's not in the book, but I at least got you there. So that's it in a nutshell. It has a lot of off market, lead generation. Again, also networking. And these are all things that we use right now in order to find deals consistently, which is the key. Marketing plans, negotiation, everything is pretty much in there.
Outstanding. That's fantastic. If you haven't picked it up already, you're missing out. So definitely reach out and check out Bigger Pockets. The link will be down below in the description. All
Nice.
right. Anson, you have anything else for us, buddy?
But I think we covered a lot, and yeah, it was super awesome to talk to you and figure out what we're doing, and awesome to hear the things that you're doing with your son and your business. And yeah, I was excited to be here.
To reach out to Anson, check out the links in the show notes. If you're getting value or find this information interesting, do me a favor, give us a review on iTunes or Spotify. And don't forget to sign up for the Aim High REI and catch our Friday live streams. It's free. Until next time, aim high.